Hi, everybody. It is week 12 of practicing Stoicism. Hope you guys are well. Today we're talking about remarks 41 through 45. And some of these are still focusing on what are the correct actions or what are the correct responses to what we see people doing. And then there's a move to thinking more about correct reasoning, correct inferences, what we assent to and don't. And that's, remember, if you the way that Epictetus divides up the topics of Stoicism, there are three topics. One is um, regulating your desires and your aversions. The second is has to do with the roles that you play and the actions that are associated with them. And then the third is uh, just more generally thinking about the impressions that you take in and how you respond to them. Do you assent to them correctly? Do you reason correctly? So sometimes he describes the third discipline or topic as something that provides a kind of security to the previous two. Really, all three go together. It's sort of a big single package, but you have to start somewhere, and you can work on different aspects. So the first one is drawing a distinction between the body and the mind, which is not surprising. And he says it is the mark of a crude or foolish disposition to spend most of one's time on things that have to do with the body. So you can think of this as raising a question about how should we spend our time. And he says we shouldn't spend lots of time exercising, eating, drinking, defecating, copulating, um, bodily things. These are all things we will do sometimes, right, on occasion. But he says it shouldn't be kind of the focus of our life. They should be more incidentally just things that we happen to do on occasion, maybe as just a part of your regular life. But your focus, he says, should be on your mind. Um, Not so surprising. Um, Second one, 42, is looking at other people and how sometimes they may appear to behave badly, right? What do? Sometimes uh, they treat us badly, they criticize us, and so the question is, well, how should you respond? We know that the Stoics do not think that what other people do to us count as legitimate harms, and that's a hard idea to take on board, especially given some of the things that people can do. Like they can physically harm us, harm our bodies. They can be abusive psychologically, but they don't, whatever the things they do, those all remain outside of us, right? They're not up to us. They don't touch the moral center of who we are. And so, from the Stoics' point of view, they aren't really going to count as harm. But here, this is a case where what Epictetus is recommending is that we maybe be more gentle towards those who act in the way that they do. Why? Because we should remind ourselves that whenever people act, whatever they do, it's always based on their sense of what is appropriate, right? People do what they believe is right. They have a judgment of a situation or an opinion, and that's what guides their actions, not your opinion. So if they have an incorrect opinion, um, that's on them. That's not on you, right? And when they act on something that's incorrect, like an incorrect opinion, the ones who are harmed in that situation are not you, but them. So that's a case where if they make a mistake in their action, they have actually harmed themselves. And to help us to see that, Epictetus draws an analogy with incorrect reasoning, right? So sometimes people make a mental mistake, or a judgment error, or they make an incorrect inference. The example he gives is a very simple one. He says, suppose you take a true statement, but you think it's false. You take it to be false. Well, that doesn't have any effect on the statement. The statement remains true. That's what it is. That's its nature. Um, but you have now made a mistake. So you're the one that's harmed, not the statement. And so, how does the analogy work? Well, so we, the ones who have been treated badly or the ones who've been criticized, are like the statement, right? It doesn't change us at all when they do, like if they engage in an incorrect action in relation to us, we aren't harmed. We are still who we are. We are good or bad based on our moral choices. But the person who has made that mistake, they have harmed themselves. That's the main thing he wants us to take away. And I think he thinks if you remember this and you kind of make a habit of reminding yourself of this, then you will maybe be more gentle, more indulgent toward those who criticize you, right? What you'll often say is, well, that's what they thought. That was what seemed right to them. Um, and even if you can see that it's based on a mistake, maybe you'll be more what's the word we want? I mean, you won't be as harsh towards them, right? You'll be more humane towards them. Um, Okay, the third one is interesting. He says every situation has two handles. So immediately you know you're working with an image, right? A situation has two handles, and I would say at least two handles. There may be multiple ones, but the key is there's a correct handle that you're looking for. You need to learn to look for. And then there's one or more incorrect handles. Um, and the handle that, the correct handle is the one that makes it supportable. The situation means like you could lift it or that you can hold it. You can handle the situation, basically, right? And he gives us an example. Suppose your brother mistreats you, right? There are two ways you might look at that situation. You might fasten on to the idea that of being mistreated, right? And maybe even thinking incorrectly from the Stoic point of view that you've been harmed. He says the situation will not be supportable using that handle, meaning that you will not be sort of reacting to it and assessing it in the right sort of way. The other option, he says, is to focus on the fact that it's your brother who's done whatever it is he's done, right? That's somebody that you grew up with, someone that also, of course, a brother should behave in a certain way, and he may have behaved poorly, but again, that's not a harm to you, right? You are still you. What's your appropriate response? Well, as a brother or sister, you need to continue to respond to your brother in the way that is appropriate. But focusing in on that aspect, he says that's the right handle, right? That's the one that allows you to carry the situation, right? Hold on to it, bear its weight, and like I said, I mean, handle it. Like, how do you deal with the situation? Well, you need to look at it in the right sort of way, basically, is what he's saying. Okay, so the last two, remarks 44 and 45, I think of as companions. They go together, and they are about bad or invalid inferences and good or valid inferences. So we're thinking about reasoning and what we should assent to, what we can conclude from a situation based on the impressions that we receive. And you might think, I mean, the main point is he's trying to draw our attention to the fact is that we are in the habit of frequently making bad inferences, or of either reasoning too quickly or of concluding things that don't follow from what we see, right? So he's trying to get us to see that. He's trying to get us to break that habit, to slow things down. And when it comes to 44, the focus is on you, on yourself, on the person who, the person is looking at certain qualities that may be true of them and making a bad inference about something about themselves. When we get to 45, the focus shifts to other people, right? We're looking at other people, we're seeing things about them, and then we are concluding things about them. So in both cases, he thinks there are better and worse inferences we can draw. Okay, so in the case of yourself, he says you might find that you are richer than another person, right? So you might say, I'm richer than you. Therefore, what can you conclude? Therefore, I am better than you. He says that is invalid. Or I am more eloquent than you. I can speak more clearly, more persuasively. Can I infer from that I am better than you? Again, invalid. Better inferences, he says, are sort of remaining at the level of maybe moral qualities. I mean, something like, well, if I'm richer than you, I can conclude that my property is better than yours. Or if I'm more eloquent than you, I can conclude that my diction is better than yours. So that he thinks is right. But of course, what's really important is to sort of draw this distinction between some of these qualities we have and ourselves. As he concludes, you yourself are neither property nor diction. So notice that what's going on in the bad inferences is you're sort of moving from what I might call an outside quality to an inside quality, to a moral quality, concluding that you're morally better than another because you are, say, materially better. You have more materially. It doesn't follow from that you have more morally speaking. Okay, and that same sort of pattern goes on in remark 45 as well. Okay, so in that case, he says what we're doing in particular is we're frequently, without thinking about it, almost on autopilot, we are moving from descriptions that we of things that we're certain of, right? That they are evident before us, like that we don't doubt them, that we can, with our own eyes, see these things, to things that are uncertain. So we're basically moving from something and concluding something where we don't have adequate evidence to conclude that, right? And that's the sort of thing you want to stop, right? You want to you only want to draw inferences that are justified, that are reasonable, right? For example, he says, you see somebody bathing in a hurry, right? You might quickly, without even thinking about it, conclude, wow, that person is a bad, they're doing something bad there, right? They don't know how to take a bath. Like they're bad. They're a bad bather or something like that. Can you conclude that? He says, no, right? You shouldn't criticize them for their bathing. Instead, just say, well, what can you conclude? Hey, that person just took a bath very quickly, right? That's true. And you're kind of remain neutral about whether or not the way they're behaving is something that you can criticize. And remember also, the Stoics are kind of in general not that keen on criticizing others anyway. I mean, they're not unwilling to do it, but they do conceive of this sort of moral life as primarily about yourself, right? You're trying to pay attention to yourself. You're trying to make sure that you are making the right choices. But on occasion, of course, you may see someone, you may need to intervene, you may need to draw a judgment. But what he's trying to point out is that habitually we often move too quickly and we draw conclusions that are unjustified. How about a second example he gives is somebody who drinks a lot of wine, for example. And he says, you might immediately want to sort of say, wow, that is a bad person. What a drunk or something. Like he says, don't do that. Don't criticize them. What can you say? You can say they drink a lot, right? They have just the sheer quantity. You can, that's an objective fact. You can measure it, right? You can see the bottle. They drank a whole bottle here or whatever. But that further inference, he says, take your time. Don't necessarily conclude unless you know their reasons, right? I mean, in some cases you might just think it doesn't matter what their reasons are, but his point is slow it down and ask yourself, could there be reasons why they're doing what they're doing that might place it in a more favorable light? So partly this is about trying to get us to not be so quick to judge others, not be so quick to criticize others, break ourselves of that habit, right? So he's kind of basically, you could see this as an exercise, what he's recommending is that we withhold criticism of others, right? Just stop doing that and notice when you do it and try to like break that habit, right? Describe what you see, but don't make a judgment about the moral nature of what a person has done until you learn the reasons why they did it, right? So our habit is that we will often draw conclusions about someone's moral character, right, without adequate evidence, right? So slow it down, observe what you really see, and what really follows logically from what you see, and try to limit your inferences to that. Okay, that's it for this week. I will see you again next week.